I discovered the Winslow family's haunted orphanages. None of the children ever came home. I never should have opened that door. I stood there, my heart racing, feeling a chill run down my spine, as if someone was whispering my name. The Winslow orphanages loomed ahead, cracked windows and peeling paint, their eerie presence swallowing the last light of day. My life had been ordinary, predictable, until curiosity lured me into this labyrinth of shadows and secrets. Every corner of this place felt alive. The heavy air weighed on my chest, thick with the scent of mildew and something more sinister. I stepped inside. My foot echoed against the creaking floorboards, a sound that felt like a warning. Silence wrapped around me, cold and suffocating. But then, a soft rustle. I froze. My eyes scanned the darkness, straining to see beyond the flickering shadows. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. It wasn't just a breeze, it was laughter. Children's laughter. Light and haunting. It danced through the stale air, tugging at something deep within me. I knew the stories how the Winslow children had vanished, one by one. They never returned, just faded into the night. I pressed on, drawn deeper into the abyss. The walls whispered secrets, holding onto the grief of 100 lost souls. The temperature dropped, making my breath visible, swirling like ghosts in the dim light. Then, I heard Ida's soft thumping, rhythmic yet wrong. My heart raced. I turned, expecting to see someone, anyone. But only shadows greeted me, slipping away like whispers as I stepped further. A toy lay abandoned in the dust, a small, cracked doll with glassy eyes, staring blankly, as if it watched me. A shiver coursed through me, the kind that roots you in place. I leaned down to pick it up, when suddenly, a loud bang echoed through the hall. My instincts screamed to run, but I was frozen, rooted, replaying every dark tale I had ever heard about this place, and then, there it was. A figure at the end of the hall, barely illuminated by the moonlight creeping through the broken windows. It was small, shadowy. The familiar laughter curled back into the air, taunting, beckoning. My chest tightened, fear flooding my veins. What was it? Who were they? In that moment, I realized I was not alone. Hey! Before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon, and while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The figure shifted, its movements jerky and unnatural, almost as if it were fighting against its own limbs. It turned slightly, allowing a sliver of moonlight to reveal its face. I gasped, my breath hitching in my throat. In that moment, time seemed to twist around me, thick and suffocating, as a pair of lifeless, wide eyes met my own. Come play with us, it whispered, a voice sweet yet laced with something chilling, a haunting melody that echoed through the desolation of the orphanage. The other children suddenly appeared, spilling from the darkness, their small forms like shadows stretching and twisting in the dim light. They swarmed around the figure, their laughter morphing into a cacophony of eerie giggles that bounced off the walls. Climbing into my mind like an insidious vine, I stumbled backward, my legs shaking. Their faces were blurred, indistinct, lost children with hollow expressions, seeming to grasp for something just out of reach. I had read about children like them, those who had come to the orphanage, their smiles carried away by the winding tales of sorrow that buried itself in the very foundations of the place. Were they still looking for joy, or had it long since been snuffed out in the depths of despair? Stay and play, they chimed together, their voices overlapping in a sickening harmony, pulling me closer to their realm of darkness. I could feel the weight of their gaze, their emptiness consuming me. I turned to run, but the twisted laughter enveloped me like a cocoon, filling the space to suffocation. It echoed in my ears, drowning out every rational thought. The walls seemed to pulse around me, vibrating with a sinister energy as if the building itself was alive, reacting to my fear. I stumbled into a hallway, desperately seeking escape, but the edges of my vision blurred, shadows expanding and swallowing the light. Every door I passed groaned, some whispering my name, coaxing me to turn back. To delve deeper into the abyss, I burst into a room, breathing heavily, only to come face to face with more toys dolls, oddly positioned to gaze towards the center as if waiting for an unseen audience. Their expressions twisted and malformed, portraits of torment that made my gut clench. One doll, larger than the rest, sat slumped in the corner, its cracked porcelain skin marred with streaks of what looked like dark blood. A little boy knelt beside it, his small hand resting on the doll's head. "Why don't you play with us?" he asked, his voice cool and inviting, chilling me to the core. The weight of his gaze sent an unbearable dread coursing through me. I could see the fleeting light of relief in my mind but felt the sharp claws of terror raking at my heart. "Where are the others?" I whispered, barely able to form words. "What happened to them?" The boy's smile faded, replaced by a grim expression. His mouth opened wider, revealing an impossibly long row of rotten teeth. "They're still here, just like you will be," he hissed before fading back into the shadows, the toys around him starting to jerk unnaturally in rhythm with the laughter. My pulse quickened. I needed to leave, needed to break free from this nightmare. But a sudden rustling caught my attention. I turned to see the doll rising, its eyes glinting with something alive, a refusal to be forgotten. It tilted its head, and I felt an unseen force pulling me toward it, as if the air was thickening, dragging me down into the depths with the beckoning spirits. The laughter grew louder, the shadows deeper, and panic surged within me. "Get away!" I shrieked, stumbling backward. I felt a consciousness around me, a perverse dance of spirits weaving through the very fabric of my being. They encircled me, growing bolder, and then the lights flickered once, twice before plunging me into darkness. I blinked, and the room had transformed. The walls were trembling, pulsating like a heartbeat. 1,000 whispers clawed at my sanity, a cacophony that silenced my thoughts. The last glimpse I had of the shadows was of their flickering eyes, full of hunger, watching expectantly, straining. Against the invisible chains that bound me, I saw an unyielding door at the far end of the room, its handle glinting temptingly in the dark. With every ounce of strength left, I made a break for it, the walls closing in, the laughter crescendoing into a wild frenzy, as if they were cheering for my surrender. Just as my fingers wrapped around the cold brass handle, I heard the soft patter of tiny feet behind me, the laughter stilled, replaced by a singular voice that chilled my spine. "You can't leave, you're one of us now." In the blink of an eye, I turned, heart racing, but the doorway I had fought for vanished. The shadows surged forward, and in that instant, I knew I was trapped, lost within the ghastly realm of the Winslow orphanage. And as I felt the hands of despair reach for me, I screamed, unleashing a cry that dissipated into the hollow void, unanswered, echoing into the abyss that now engulfed my very soul. The air thickened with an oppressive dread as darkness folded around me like the chill of a grave. I was disoriented, lost between the walls of the orphanage that seemed to shift like a living organism, pulsating with a malevolent heartbeat. The shadows danced closer, their outlines rippling like oil across water, taunting me with their sinister grace. "Join us," a chorus of disembodied voices hummed gently, echoing through the halls. They seemed both hauntingly familiar and impossibly distant, intertwining with the fabric of my fear. I stumbled, trying to orient myself in this monstrous labyrinth, the laughter now a perverse lullaby whispering sweet nothings of despair. Suddenly, I felt a tug at my sleeve, a faint presence brushing against my skin, and I whipped around to find the young boy again, his eyes sunk in pools of darkness devoid of life, yet somehow still sparkling with a haunting glee. "The others miss you," he said, tilting his head. "They can't wait to play. They're gone. They are all gone," I shouted, my voice barely cutting through the suffocating silence that followed my outburst. Panic fueled my desperate urge to free myself from this nightmare, and I turned to break for the one remaining light flickering from an open doorway at the far end of the room. But as I took a single step, the atmosphere around me shifted, thickening like molasses. An unbearable cold swept through my very being, wrapping around my chest like icy fingers, refusing to let go. The shadows stirred, coiling and shifting, taking on grotesque forms that were too familiar lost children. Their faces obscured but hauntingly recognizable all the same. I caught fleeting glimpses of eyes wide with fear, pleading silently as they swarmed me, wrapping their small arms around my legs, urging me to join them in their eternal torment. Their tiny voices whispered as one, "Come home, it's safe here. Home is where we play forever." No, no. Desperation clawed at my throat as I fought against their grasp, tearing away to reach the doorway. The walls pulsed ominously, maintaining a cruel rhythm that matched the pounding of my heart. I braced myself, forging onward, desperate to escape the nightmare that surrounded me. But a deafening crash reverberated from above, rattling the very structure of the orphanage. Dust and debris cascaded down from the ceiling as shadows screeched in unison, their once playful demeanor twisted into fury. I spun around, horrified to see a dark figure looming above me, an embodiment of every terror that ever plagued this place. "Why do you forsake us?" it shrieked, its voice a cacophony of the damned, blending anger and pain into an unforgiving torrent. It reached toward me with skeletal fingers, and the air seemed to grow thick with sorrow and rage, a palpable force that threatened to pin me to the ground. I screamed, wrestling against the chains of despair, summoning every shred of resolve. I surged forward, grasping the handle of the door just inches away, summoning my remaining strength to pull it open. But as I thrust it aside, the void behind me shifted again, transforming the corridor into a swirling abyss, the walls collapsing inward, twisting grotesquely, shifting between realms in which time distorted and reality cracked under its weight. In that moment of chaos, I felt them, the cold, ephemeral hands of the children pulling me back, luring me into their insidious embrace. They whispered in my ear, their words soft, seductive, stay with us forever." I was torn between the haunting embrace of their childish laughter and the screaming panic within me, the terrible yearning for escape battling against the sinister pull of belonging. And just as I thought I could free myself from their clutches, the shadows whipped around me, drawing me back, and I stumbled, falling into the darkness where echoes of laughter morphed into sharp cries of despair as my hands slipped from the doorframe. A single thought pierced through my chilling realization that paralyzed me with terror. I blinked, and suddenly there was silence, the laughter, replaced by an ominous stillness. Slowly, the shadows faded, and before me stood the little boy again, a smile spreading across his bland, psychotic face. "It's time to play," he said, the ground beneath me rumbling as the shadows began to swirl, weaving together into a living darkness that reached for me. And that's when I heard Ida's singular whisper rising from the depths of their realm, slithering through the air. A sentence that made my heart freeze, "Welcome home." The floor trembled, and the world around me exploded into chaos, the darkness pulling tighter, and I realized, in that harrowing moment, the truth of the Winslow family's legacy. Each child once lost now anchored a piece of their spirit within this nightmare, and I was about to become one with them. And then, just as everything blinked into an all-consuming darkness, the shadows erupted into frantic movement, 1,000 tiny hands reaching for me. The last remnants of light flickered like dying embers before completely vanishing, leaving nothing but the echo of my own terrified scream trailing off into the void. My body fell weightless into the abyss, the darkness swallowing me whole, a relentless tide that dragged me deeper into the heart of despair. Frantic whispers enveloped my consciousness, intertwining with the raucous echoes of lost laughter. It felt as if I were being submerged in their collective anguish. I clawed at the void around me, my nails scraping against an unseen surface, but it was as if the darkness was indestructible, a chasm yearning to engulf me suddenly. The chilling cold was pierced by a faint shimmer, the flicker of a distant light illuminating a face, the boy's. His smile twisted hauntingly, a grim reflection of innocence lost, dancing just out of reach. "Don't be afraid," he urged, his voice like gravel scraping against glass. "You'll love it here." The odd calmness settled within the overwhelming dread, as if the boy's words wrapped themselves around me, promising solace amidst the chaos. But instinct screamed otherwise. I shot my hand forward, desperate to grasp whatever glimmer of hope that light represented. But with every mile of darkness I traversed, it flickered further away. I felt the children's tiny grips returning, overpowering my attempts to break free. They tugged and pulled, festooning the depths of my being with the weight of their despair. The echoes of their cries morphed into something grotesque, turning the memories of childhood into a sinister serenade. "We just want to play," they chanted, their voices a symphony of tight, unyielding fear. Through sheer will, I wrestled against the tide of voices. "Let me go," I bellowed, a rawness coating my throat. And for an agonizing moment, the endless pull relented, the shadows receding just enough for me to feel solid ground beneath my feet. I staggered forward, breathing heavily, feeling the buzz of adrenaline coursing through me. But the world around me felt warped and unfriendly. Before me sprawled a dimly lit room, the walls soaked with the murmur of forgotten dreams and brittle memories. Worn wooden chairs encircled a table cluttered with dilapidated toys. What was once a vibrant collection now lay rusted and chipped, as if years of neglect had consumed their color, their spirit. The air hung stale and heavy with the scent of decay, clinging to my skin like a shroud. And then I heard Ida's soft thud, a rustle in the corner of the room. I turned slowly, dread pooling in my gut as a shadow peeled away from the wall. It was a figure, cloaked in the grotesque remnants of a child's dress, its edges frayed, stained with decades of sorrow. The doll-like face tilted towards me, lifeless eyes sprawling within the hollows of its socket, yet somehow focused on me with a fervent intensity. "Oh, you want to join us?" it croaked, the words flowing like molasses that left a sickening aftertaste. It moved closer, gliding across the floor with a predatory grace that made my skin crawl. I stepped back, my heartbeat echoing in my ears, drowning out the whispering dread that surrounded me. And oh no, I gasped, backing away until I bumped into the table. Almost instinctively, I reached for a rusted toy lying there, a heavy iron soldier, just needing a swing to become a weapon. But as I brandished it, the child paused, laughter bubbling up like effervescent poison. "They can't hurt you here," the figure sang, its voice dripping with sinister delight. "Not anymore. Stay back," I cried, driven by wild desperation as my grip tightened around the cold metal. But with every second I wasted holding on to the weapon, shadows shifted behind the figure, frolicking closer, their haunting giggles echoing through the air. They spread out like a dark cloak, encircling me once more, their tendrils reaching out, trying to bind me in their grasp. "Join the game," they chorused, their eagerness palpable and all-consuming, sagging over me like a noose. I shouted, the ghastly words escaping my lips like a raw, wounded cry. I swung the iron soldier with all the force I could muster, an act of fury against an unseen enemy. But the moment it connected, I found that it passed through the shadow as if the darkness itself were an illusion, leaving me off balance. The shadow child sneered, the once playful demeanor transforming into a visage of ire. "You can't escape," it remarked, sounding almost bored. "This is your home now." The ground shook violently, a cacophony of laughter erupting, shrill and twisted. I stumbled as they surged closer, and in that second of impending doom, a fragment of thought glimmered through my mind, fragments of faces, memories drowned in despair, ensnared in unrelenting wrath, all wearing a version of the boy's innocent smile. "Help," the shadows rasped, a plea intertwining with their gleeful mockery. "Help us." And then it happened. The air around me thickened, the walls groaned, collapsing inwards as the shadows became a vortex, pulling me toward the center, toward the darkness that swirled like a tempest, carrying with it the echoes of a sorrowful symphony of the lost. As the whirlpool of despair consumed me, I saw a fleeting glimpse of countless eyes staring back at me, all pleading. "You're one of us," they shrieked as the vortex spun tighter, the faces cracking apart into anguished silhouettes. In that moment of excruciating clarity, the true horror was revealed. They weren't just trapped. They didn't just want me to join them. They needed me to be the catalyst, to free them from this eternal torment. "Help," I gasped, but my voice was drowned in the tempest as darkness swirled ferociously. I felt an invisible force seize my heart, squeezing tight, and with one final gasp of desperation, I attempted to scream only to hear the shadows erupting in wild laughter instead, a chorus of maniacal delight echoing through the void. Then, just as I felt myself slipping away, clawing against the void, I froze abruptly, caught in a moment of undeniable reality. Before me stood a mirror, reflecting every child trapped in the orphanage. Their eyes wide, terrified, mouths moving in silent screams. And at the center, a reflection of me, but not as I had existed. Instead, I saw the remnants of something darker, for the child I saw smiled with unholy glee, a sinister echo of the boy ahead of me. "Welcome home," the boy whispered again, stepping aside as the children surged toward me. My heart stopped, and it hit me like a thunderclap. I was no longer just their hostage. I was becoming one of them. Their hands reached for me, the precipice of joining their eternal game looming ever closer, while the air became thick with their whispers and the clock struck past the point of no return. Suddenly, a deep rumble reverberated through the ground, as the oppressive shadows let out one final collective scream. I was thrown backwards into the void, the mirror shattering around me, casting shards of bone-like darkness toward my very soul, and I realized in that moment I was standing on the brink of becoming something far worse than their plaything. The darkness exploded, and I fell, plummeting into an everlasting night where the boundaries of horror intertwined, and as the echoes of the children enveloped me, I could only manage a breathless word: help. The void swallowed me deeper, a palpable darkness where not even hope dared to flicker. In my descent, I could feel the chilling fingers of the departed children grazing my ankles, a caressing of sorrow that slithered up my legs and coiled tightly around my torso. I gasped for air as the taste of rot filled my mouth, and despair grew heavier like a leaden cloak wrapped tightly around my shoulders. With a sudden, jarring motion, I landed onto cold, unyielding stone, the floor of what felt like an expansive cavern, a cathedral of sorrow far removed from civility. Every breath drew in a coldness that scraped against my throat, an ever-present reminder of the fate that awaited me. Shadows writhed in the corners, darting to and fro with malicious intent, their shapes contorting and morphing against the flickering glow of my surroundings. That I rose shakily to my feet, my mind racing, desperate to seek some form of escape. The faint luminescence that guided me through the abyss was dimming, snuffed out by the ever-encroaching stagnation lurking behind me. Just ahead, a haunting whisper sang a melody both beautiful and grotesque, beckoning for me to follow. The sound morphed into a cacophony of laughter, weaving through the echoing chamber and wrapping around me like a shivering embrace. "Come play with us," they giggled, the voices twinkling with an unnerving glee, yet laced with the frayed edges of despair. "We've been waiting." The shadows conspired, swirling closer, casting long fingers that stretched toward me from beneath the jagged stones. I caught fleeting glimpses of movements, a child with stringy hair tumbling into the inky darkness. Another, eyes wide and painted with terror, scrambling into the recesses of a crumbling alcove. Each image flashed before me like a cursed slideshow, taunting me with the remnants of stolen innocence. The walls seemed to pulse with a knotted life of their own, beating in rhythm with the whispers that scuttled through my mind, refocused on their insistent plea. In desperation, I clutched my head, pressing against the onslaught of sound, hoping to drown out the chilling call. "Please," I gasped, desperation woven through my words. "What do you want from me?" The air turned thick, oppressive, extinguishing the remaining points of light. From the inky blackness before me, a figure emerged again, the boy. His countenance split into a rictus grin that twisted his delicate features into something grotesque. "You must choose," he sang, the mocking lilt echoing through the cavern. "Will you save us, or will you succumb? When the clock strikes 3, all must pay." His laughter trickled through the air like a serpent, slithering into the depths of my consciousness. Dropping my hands, I faltered backward as the wave of dread washed over me. "What clock?" I managed to stammer, my heart pounding furiously against my chest. He pointed behind me, his finger curling as shadows stirred from the gloom. Unrecoverable terror danced in my veins as I turned slowly, following where his gaze directed on the cavern wall. The rock had formed into a grotesque clock the hands ticking slowly yet steadily, each movement resonating with the cadence of an impending doom. Just below it, a chalkboard bore the crude, jagged scrawl of unspeakable acts, etchings seemingly recorded by trembling fingers never looking back. The price of freedom, it read, the letters warped into terrifying shapes that echoed the faces of those trapped within. As I stared, horrified, the clock hand clicked again. The sound sliced through the cavern's murmur, throbbing in time with the beat of my panicked heart. Time was running out. Without warning, the shadows surged forward, racing past me to encompass the clock. I turned back, each breath quickening. The children's whispers shifted to screams, frantic and pained, clawing at my sanity. They rallied around me, breathless with madness. A leering crowd of despair led by shadows, now more corporeal, straining against the boundaries of their dark confinement. "No, please," I shrieked, stumbling backwards, my balance faltering, as I clashed with the cast-off toys littering the cavern floor. They jangled eerily, shifting like the spirits of those long lost. I stumbled over a doll's head with twisted features, its painted eyes staring blankly up at me. "Join us," they screeched, their fingers curling around my limbs as if to tether me to their endless plight. They began to blend into a swirling mass of limbs and shadows, drawing closer, their forms churning a cyclone of hope and despair. The clock ticked feverishly, each second pulling me further into the abyss. I felt tendrils wrapped around my throat, squeezing, choking my pleas into silence. "Please, what must I do?" I gasped, the room spinning, the edges of reality collapsing into an all-consuming darkness as the shadows closed in around me. At that moment, the clock split, its face cracking and splintering, and from the depths emerged a soul-searing wail, echoing throughout the caverns. It reverberated into me, stirring something ancient and profound, a familiar presence that clawed at the edges of my memory. "Help us!" they cried again, but this time it was accompanied by a shape that emerged from the shadows, eerily familiar. A fleeting glimpse of myself, distorted and twisted, a dark mirror reflecting my true self. And with that realization, a blinding pulse of light erupted from the chaos, shocking the shadows into retreat for just a heartbeat, revealing glimmers of fearful faces within. I was caught in the paradox of allure and horror, teetering on the precipice between salvation and inevitable doom. Then the clock struck 3, and silence fell, a terrifying hush enveloping the cavern, leaving my heart resonating with an unholy dread. The shadows surged once more, gathering speed, and as the world around me blurred into an inescapable maw of darkness, I could do nothing but cry out, "No, I won't be one of you." And just before the abyss consumed me whole, I caught one word slipping through the echoing silence, the children's screams entwining with an ethereal laugh that promised chaos ahead. "Welcome," it whispered, as the darkness ruptured, and the shadows raced towards me, racing against the clock of the unending night. The weight of the world fell upon me as the shadows engulfed my final protest, the cacophony swirling into a deafening roar that rattled my very bones. I felt the last vestiges of light flickering out, leaving me adrift in a sea of black. Fear carved icy trails down my spine, but underneath that fear, a cruel curiosity began to bloom, sprouting against the gravel of my resolve. Sudden stillness washed over the void, a profound silence that stretched on like a long-forgotten promise of despair. The heavy, almost suffocating presence was palpable. I could almost taste the longing wafting through the air, a perfume spilled from an undiscovered tragedy. The darkness was no longer just absence. It pulsed with a heartbeat, echoing alongside my own. A ghostly symphony of despair and hope entwined, and in the absence of sound came an odd intimacy, as if the shadows adjusted to my presence, curling around me and making room, wrapping me in soft tendrils laden with unspoken secrets. A familiar sensation washed over me, own I had felt before, a stifling embrace that threatened to drown me as it had the children who cried for my salvation. They hung around me like a suffocating fog, but amidst the clutches of shadows, my focus sharpened, drawn to a flicker, a shimmer of silver that emerged in the corner of my vision. I pivoted to face it, probing through the onyx darkness with trembling hands. The atmosphere thickened, electrifying the space around me as the silver glint morphed into a shimmering figure, a child. Tall for their age but ghostly pale, swathed in rags that seemed to float as if underwater. Their amber eyes shone like molten gold, piercing through the veil of darkness. "Will you save us?" the child breathed, their voice hovering near, weaving through the silence like silk. "How?" I whispered, every syllable strained in desperation, as I wrestled against the rising tide of shadows. The figure tilted its head, their expression a blend of sadness and something else, hope. "Maybe, remember," they urged, extending a trembling finger toward the black void, illuminating a patch where shadows quivered. "Every soul here has a tether, a memory to your world. You must find it." "Find what?" I stammered, the word clawing its way out of my throat. "Your tether." The child's voice surged, momentarily rising above the keen of the forgotten spirits around us. "It binds the living to the lost. Only then can you free us from our torment." I searched within myself, remnants of my life flashing before my eyes, a collage of happy memories, bright and warm. The mundane tasks, welcome laughs, and breathy whispers scattered like ash in the winds of this dying place. But where was the tether they spoke of? I narrowed my mind to focus on those moments until suddenly, sharp as a dagger, a thought pierced my consciousness. My brother. The memory washed over me, crisp and potent, a shared summer day in the park, with laughter wrapping around us like the golden sun on our skin. It was that same laughter echoing now, churning the shadows with a violent surge. I gripped it tightly, pulling at the cords of connection, desperate to strengthen the bond that had tethered us for so long. "I see him," I cried, the world around me beginning to twist and shift, the cavern's edifice bending at the edges like light diffusing through glass. The shadows quaked, groaning against my inner light, resenting my defiance. They lashed out, clawing at my wrists, eroding my grip on the joyous memory. But through the chaos, that amber gaze anchored me, the child floating ever nearer. "Let go of the darkness. Feel the spark of love." Their eyes pulsed with urgency. I closed my eyes and took a deep, grounding breath, surrendering to that feeling, the love that bloomed amidst the turmoil. I whispered my brother's name into the churning abyss, releasing my grip on despair. The shadows quivered in retaliation, coiling tighter around me as if to swallow me whole. Suddenly, blinding light erupted from my heart, exploding like stars scattered across the astral plane, illuminating the cavern for the first time. And there, amidst the shadows, lay the bodies of the lost, etched in sorrow, faces twisted with longing and terror, much like the children I had faced. As they drew closer, I felt a surge of warmth wrap around me, a protective cocoon that encased the chaos. The ghastly laughter morphed into a new harmony, a melody of lost voices rising toward the light as my tether expanded, illuminating the horrors around me. But even as my heart danced with what felt like triumph, I noticed it. Within that radiant sphere stood another figure. But this one, unlike the rest, loomed grotesquely, the tarnished visage of a monstrous grown-up conflated with the shadows. Eyes wide and unblinking, it lifted a hand towards me, long and crooked fingers extending in anticipation. With a sickening realization, I understood. It wasn't just the children trapped here. The soul of this creature, the manifestation of years of unbridled hatred and despair, was waiting. A chilling laugh erupted from within it, building on the chorus of lost souls, a sound both beautiful and horrifying, one that reverberated against the walls of my mind. "Your love cannot save them," it crooned, the shadows around me flaring with malevolence. "You've only awakened me in the blinding glow of rebellion and hope." The clock chimed once again, 3 deafening times this time, each note mingling with a dark crescendo that threatened to pull me into the depths of the shadows once more. Refusing to let go, the children screamed, their cries rising above the shudder of all-consuming wrath, their joy crushed beneath the weight of darkness. And in that split second of realization, I turned to flee, desperate to escape the grasp of that insidious laughter. Yet as I moved, I felt hands grasping at my ankles, small, desperate hands. Time was running out, and as I was pulled back into that nightmare realm, I felt the tug of darkness against the tether of my love, threatening to sever the connection I had fought so hard to reclaim. I stumbled, caught between realms, and with heart racing, I gasped, "I won't let go. I will save you." But the shadows shrieked and tightened around me, and in the frigid grip of despair, I realized the horrifying truth in the end. It was not just the children's souls that were at stake. It was my own, reckoning with the specter that loomed at the edge of my tether, and I was about to slip into a darkness deeper than I had ever known. Before I could scream, the clock struck a final, cacophonic note and everything shattered into pieces. The shards of light cascaded like brittle glass, collapsing into a vortex of shadow that spiraled into nothingness. My heart pounded as I fought against the crushing weight, the whispers hissing through the gaps of my resolve. Each fleeting second felt like unraveling yarn, countless threads intertwining my reality with that of the children, with the grotesque figure shadowing our terror as the curtain of darkness descended. The last remnants of warmth from the tether flickered, struggling to maintain its fragile grip. My breath turned shallow, echoing in the vacuum of my mind, twisting with screams of despair that surged around me in unending chorus pleading for release coupled with malignant laughter. A reminder of what I was up against. Something deeper lingered beneath the surface. A pulse of raw emotion like a shadowy heartbeat drumming against the core of my being. I could feel the monstrous figure's gaze piercing through every fiber of my existence, its twisted grin widening, feeding off my growing fear. I thought of my brother, of the light spilling from that sacred memory. It held my focus, but it wasn't enough. I was unraveling, tether fraying, desperate. I plunged deeper into the maelstrom of lost souls, fighting for fragments of the children's memories. They faded before me, chasing flickers of brighter days, but a strange sensation washed over mesomething tugged at the edges of my consciousness. A haunting refrain echoed through the shadows, a lullaby of loss and an edge of something sickly sweet. I turned slowly, eyes adapting to the dim light. A tentative figure stood at the far corner of the abyss, half-formed from the darkness, a spectral parent searching among the shapes of those abandoned. Their form flickered like a candle flame, barely clinging to existence within the phantasmagoria. Where I expected desperation, a tender yet fierce love emanated from their being, twisted and threatening to anchor me further into the depths of hopelessness. Find them. The parent's voice broke through the cacophony, rough yet imbued with longing. You feel it, don't you? Love is the tether. Use it to guide them here. Who are you? My voice wavered, lost among the agonizing sobs and vengeful howls, battling for coherence. Someone who once cared. Their form flickered again, revealing ghostly hands reaching for me, threads of glimmering light weaving their way around the shadows. I can help you. And in that moment, a surge of empathy, raw and powerful, rushed through me, blurring the lines of despair and love. Could I truly save them all? The spectral parent's face twisted in agony and strength, the loss of unfulfilled promises burning deep in their eyes. They gestured towards the children struggling against the suffocating darkness, arms outstretched toward their lost memories, toward a child who cried, "Mommy?" Time slowed as I watched the parent's form ripple, radiating a warmth I needed so desperately. Driven by instinct, I reached toward them, allowing that connection to spiral through a powerful weave binding us, tying my spirit to their yearning. Perhaps their sorrow was the key, an unshackled channel to connect me to the children still floundering in the shadows. Remember, they screamed, and the word echoed louder than any despair, louder than any sinister laughter. At I end that moment, realization sparked. I had to confront the figure of hatred before I could save the children. Its laughter crescendoed, sweeping through the blackness, gnawing at the edges of my sanity. I again saw the grotesque being, a dark mirror of all my insecurities. Clutching my tether like a noose, I found the strength not just to fight, but to channel the love from the spectral parent into a wave of cleansing light. I envisioned the teeth of darkness, jaws gaping, eager to consume me, and with a searing yell, I hurled the core of that luminescent power at the bloated figure. Your love doesn't belong here. It bellowed, shadows unraveling from its grotesque face as if trying to shield itself from the force of my light. It shuddered, contorting violently, long fingers, reaching out desperately as if to grasp what was slipping away. Release them, I roared, the words bursting from my lips with a fervor I had never known. but failure clawed at my soul, gnashing its teeth. Just as my light collided against the darkness, threatening to cleanse the air, the very world trembled. I could feel the bond ID established with the spectral parent pulling taut, a sharp discordance between light and shadow threatening to burst the fragile tether. A cataclysmic crack heralded the impending collapse, and then it came. The shadows screamed in an animalistic rage as the figure exploded, unleashing a torrent of darkness and memories, remnants of the orphan's cries drowning out the laughter. The fabric of reality wavered, disintegrating around me as it dragged me to its depths. The last thing I heard before everything was swallowed into darkness was the haunting echoes of the children, their cries intertwining with one eerie name vibrating in the shadows, vibrating like a curse upon my soul. Winslow. And finally, just before the blackness consumed me whole, I felt hands clasping my own, desperately reaching out, pleading, and that sickening realization crashed against my heart like cold steel. I was not just their savior, I was mired in their curse. And as icy fingers wrapped around my throat, pulling me into the much deeper void, the truth took root, unraveling my very essence. There would be no salvation for me. And as the eternal scream encased my consciousness, I vanished into the darkness, and the clock chimed, as if calling forward the next soul for the Winslow family's sinister, unending nightmare. Dense silence enveloped me as I plunged into nothingness, a cold that seeped into my very bones. Ghostly presences moved and swirled within the darkness, though no shapes were visible. It felt as if the air itself had thickened, suffocating and hostile, where every moment stretched like the endless strands of time woven within despair. The haunting echoes of the children still clung to me, their voices threading through the shadows like the faintest suggestion of a melody lost to the ages. At first, there was only darkness, a vast inky expanse that consumed the remnants of light I fought to hold on to. But then, shafts of light began to pierce the void, each pinprick of illumination throbbing like a heartbeat. My mind strained against its confines, and yet, something inexplicable drew me towards the brightness. It flickered like an old projector, framing visions from long ago. Children laughing, the sunlight catching in their higher world that felt achingly distant. However, against this glow appeared flickers of something sinister, like shadows refusing to be vanquished, darker memories bursting forth, echoing the laughter with shrieks of torment. I struggled to decipher where I was. I stuck in a memory, or was it all a haunting reflection of what I dared not confront? Find them, a voice whispered, intricately laced with sorrow and longing. It slithered through the cracks in the darkness like a wisp of smoky perfume, intoxicating yet haunting. I felt the push, that undeniable pull, urging me forward. Tentatively, I reached out, allowing my fingers to dance in the light as a torrent of images surged past me, flashing before my eyes a blurred kaleidoscope of emotions and faces trapped between two worlds. And then suddenly, I was thrown into a new landscape, a decrepit hallway lined with doors that loomed high above me like specters yearning to be seen. Their paint flaked off, colors drained as if they had forgotten the warmth of life. I moved hesitantly, each echoing footfall sending tremors down my spine. Cautiously, I approached the first door, the number 7 chipped and barely legible. A memory tugged at me. It was suffused with the gurgling laughter of a little girl, her bright eyes gleaming like the stars above. But as I pressed my ear against the cold wood, the laughter twisted, morphing into sob sorrow drowned in silence, resonating with the weight of those who had never returned home. Before I could pull away, the door swung open with a shuddering creak. I was met not with the enchanting brilliance of memory, but with the stark horror of what awaited inside. Shadows loomed, coiling around a small, dust-choked room. It was empty save for an assortment of tattered toys piled in the corner, their once vibrant forms dulled by neglect as they seemed to whisper to me through the fog of time. Fingers grazed my shoulder, cold as death. I whipped around, heart racing, chasing the flickering semblance of movement, but there was nothing. Just echoes and shadows, weaving through the dust-laden air. I could feel the claustrophobic grip of something lurking just beyond my sight, every heartbeat echoing the fear of unseen watchers. Then, in the dimness, I caught sight of a figure, a glimpse of a boy, his face pale, with eyes filled with fear and longing. He was kneeling, clutching a frayed teddy bear, the worn-out fabric gripped tightly in his small hands. "Help us," he whispered, voice trembling like a dying ember. But then, catching my gaze directly, his eyes widened with terror. "You shouldn't be here." I opened my mouth to speak, but words fell silent, buried beneath a rising tide of dread that gnawed at my very core. As he turned, revealing a shadowy corridor behind him that beckoned with insidious whispers, the room began to shift. The walls twisted, warping as time unspooled at a maddening pace, an ancient presence crawling forth where the air grew thick and stifling. The child frantically shook his head, eyes darting beyond me into the abyss growing in the shadows. A low rumble reverberated through the walls, a sound unearthly, forebodinga, reminder that time was running out. "Leave now," he cried, but I found myself paralyzed, a moth drawn to a flame that threatened to engulf me. And amidst the whirlwind of memories and shadows, a voice rose from the darkness, distorted yet familiar, curling around my senses with each syllable like chains tightening. "Why are you resisting, dear Winslow? They need you, but they will never know you." Suddenly, the teddy bear fell from the boy's grip, plummeting to the floor and bursting open to reveal the X-ray of his hollowed-out heart, a void, pulsating with darkness. The shadow behind him twisted and writhed, a glimmer of monstrous hunger rearing, and I could feel its cold breath against my neck, crawling under my skin. With every fiber of my being screaming, I spun to flee, but shadows erupted around me, tethering my limbs, pulling me into their suffocating embrace. And as I was dragged back into the storm of darkness, the final wail from the child clawed through the chaos, and all I could hear was the echoing question that sliced through the air, impaled by the weight of desperation. "Who will save us now?" My breath caught as I riffed between despair and determination, teetering on the precipice of deeper doom where the true horror awaited. And then it struck, the absolute impossible true, the voice I recognized, ripping through everything I was. "Winslow, you can never escape." The shadows deepened, their smothering grip tightening, and I knew I had only just begun to uncover the horror of the Winslow family's legacy, where love was despair, and rescue was nothing but a cruel illusion forged in darkness. The room trembled, its walls pulsating with an energy that felt sinister and alive, as if echoing the very fear I felt deep within. I staggered back, the sudden realization of the boy's warning imprinted in my mind, "They will never know you." Each word hung in the air like an unshakable prophecy, a chilling reminder saying I was ensnared now, caught in the web of the Winslow family's grotesque history. Around me, the shadows twisted and churned, and I could hear their whispers grow louder, a hollow chanting that clawed at the edges of my sanity. They called out to me with voices dripping in sorrow, promising solace but delivering only anguish. Each syllable felt like a noose tightening around my throat, constricting until I gasped for air in this cursed expanse. That I stumbled back toward the door, but it had vanished, leaving me imprisoned within this vortex of despair. The shadows seemed to respond to my fear, morphing into jagged shapes that surged forward, tongues of darkness seeking to envelop me. I shut my eyes tight, desperate for some remnant of light, yet the darkness pressed in cold, suffocating. "Help us, please." The boy's voice echoed again somewhere deep within the shadows that swirled around me. I wanted to scream, but my throat felt raw, constricted by the very air that bore witness to my panic. Clenching my fists, I wrestled with sanity, fighting the weight of despair that urged me to submit. But who was I saving? Was it me or him or the lost souls that lingered in this forsaken place? An unearthly scream shattered the air, one that felt deeply personal, cutting through the cacophony and pricking at the core of my being. "Winslow!" The echoes twisted back around me, igniting urgency, as if the very walls were alive, entangled in my fate. In moments of clarity, the boy's fear morphed into a desperate determination, his childlike exterior shifting without transition. He became a harbinger of something I could not comprehend, a messenger of the darkness woven into the family's legacy. "Follow me," he called, and before I could register, he darted back into the shadows, the corridor behind him stretching into a mouth of unfathomable gloom. Instinctively, I lunged after him, survival over sensibility. The darkness began to swallow me whole, reverberating with the cacophony of sorrow and suffering. I ran down the hall, heart thunderously pounding, breath hitching in my throat. Time was elastic here, stretching out as I chased the flickering form of the boy. An oppressive weight pressed down on my chest, saturating the air with despair. Each door that loomed along the corridor bore spectral figures, shadowed faces locked in expressions of agony. I felt their anguish pool within me as I passed, fading whispers pleading for release resonating within the depths of my mind. With a sudden jolt, the boy stumbled through a doorway, and I followed in a frenzied rush only to find myself standing beneath an unfathomable sky, stars fragmented like shards of glass. The landscape beneath was a twisted melange of crimson, an endless sea of vibrant claret that shimmered like liquid sorrow. Fleeting figures appeared and faded like dried leaves caught in a storm, children drawn from the darkness, faces pale and gaunt, eyes shimmering with lost dreams. "Help us, Winslow," they cried, their voices layered like a haunting symphony, the harmony of grief, suspended in the air heavy with unspoken horror. I felt my heart splinter in response, trapped in their gaze, an echo of sorrow that threatened to drag me into its depths. But then the shadows slithered toward me, feeding on the pain radiating from the depths of my soul, devouring my will to resist. I could sense their hunger mounting, and with it, the overwhelming pressure to succumb to the cries of despair. "Run! Go back!" The boy's frantic voice tore through the discord, yanking me from the clutches of their mournful pleas. But as I turned, panic flooded my senses. For the very sky I had just gazed upon dissolved into an endless chasm, a vertical plunge into an abyss that seemed to sway and pulse with the very essence of desolation. Unable to fathom the choice before me, I turned back one last time, finding the boy staring at me with dread-filled eyes. And it struck me, a soul-chilling reality. This child of shadows was not merely trapeze, was a keeper, insidious yet moribund, anchored to this wretched land. As the shadows released a horrible guttural growl, the earth trembled beneath my feet. I had but moments to decide. Would I leap into the suffocating void or remain and surrender to the nightmare that promised nothing but endless torment? Before I could act, the dark shapes lunged forward, pooling around me and pulling me into their chaotic embrace. The boy screeched, his tiny form blurring as the storm of black surged forward. And just as I was swallowed whole, one last word shattered through the din. "Remember me." Then there was nothing but darkness and the suffocating promise of despair. Each heartbeat a haunting tick that whispered, "Will you ever escape the Winslow family legacy?" I woke again in darkness thick, unyielding, the air suffocating as I lay still, my body weighed down, a leaden anchor in a sea of despair. Whispers circled me, a spectral murmur that pressed in, echoing against the walls of my mind like distant chimes in a nightmare. I blinked into the blackness, searching for a flicker of light, a hint of escape, but found only shadows grappling with shapes that shouldn't exist. "Help us," floated the voice of the boy, hauntingly familiar, yet laced with a desperate edge that pulled me back into the depths of the Winslow legacy. I tried to rise, to fight against the tendrils of darkness creeping toward me, but an invisible weight kept me shackled to the cold ground. Faint, flickering memories danced before my eyes. Glimmers of sunlight, laughter, lost childhood spiraling into fragments, disintegrating as the shadows fed. My heart raced with unbidden recognition. I was one of them now. The true horror unfolded slowly, a chilling realization creeping along my spine like icy fingers. I wasn't merely lost. I had become entangled in their sorrow, entwined in the very fabric of their despair. The shadows surged, coiling around me, pulling me deeper into their embrace. And as I surrendered to their grip, I felt a memory ignite within me, a memory of my brother. "Find them!" I screamed, the words surging forth like an anguished plea. The shadows echoed with laughter, a taunting melody that twisted around me, suffocating my last vestige of hope. The ground began to tremble beneath my weight, as if responding to my resolve. Each convulsion sent shudders of dread through the air. "They will consume you," rang a voice loud, commanding the grotesque figure still lurking in the periphery of my senses. "You are trapped, Winslow. As the others were before you, I felt celestial anger surge within me, igniting a glimmer of rebellion against the darkness. No, I roared, standing against the maelstrom of shadows. I won't be trapped like the others. I will find them. And then, just as despair threatened to swallow me whole, the wall before me shimmered, distorting like the surface of a pond disturbed by a stone. Through the spectral cracks, a vision materialized, a door, framed in an ethereal light. I staggered toward it, heart pounding in a rhythm that quickened with every step. Upon reaching the shimmering doorway, I pushed it open and tumbled through into a realm awash in light, snapshots of laughter and joy swirling around me, a playground filled with life. But as the images coalesced, horror seeped into my bones. Every joyous memory bore the shadow of loss, their faces flickering like dying fireflies. Suddenly, as if the world held its breath, a chilling laugh punctuated the era shriek of malevolence. The grotesque figure appeared in the distance, the embodiment of every fear that had ever clung to me. You chose to defy the darkness, Winslow. But know this. Love is a luxury paid in blood. It hissed, extending its twisted fingers towards me. The shadows reacted, surging like a tidal wave, and I felt my heart lurch. Leave me be, I cried, anger and desperation intertwining as I pushed through the separations. I must find them. With every ounce of strength, I surged forward, blocking out the cascading whispers that echoed in the recesses of my mind. Then, a flicker of familiar faces swept into view. Their small arms reached out, pleading for a connection. The children I had encountered before, their eyes glowed with longing, but their faces twisted in despair. Potent waves of sorrow washed over me. You can save us, they collectively urged, voices overlapping with an intensity that shook me to my core. But suddenly, the laughter returned, drowning their pleas as the grotesque figure unleashed a torrent of darkness. I braced myself, desperate to shield the children from the impending maelstrom. I will not let it end like this, I howled, drawing the tether of love into a thread that pulsed within me, demanding release. Time distorted around me, stretching and snapping, propelling me forward as I reached for the children. Could feel the warmth of my tether strengthening, intertwining their emptiness with love. Remember who you are, I yelled, the words sending shockwaves through the darkness. The grotesque figure lunged towards us, rage and desperation intertwined in its foul visage. You think love can conquer despair? It is nothing but a fleeting glimmer then. An unexpected light erupted from the shadows, illuminating each child's face with love that rippled against the darkness. Their laughter transformed, trailing through the air like notes of a song carried on the wind. We are here, they cried in unison, their collective voice forming a shield against the chaos. But even as the light shattered across the darkness, the figure screeched, the shadows coiling back, clawing for retention, and then I saw it, the final twist that froze my breath. The very shadows that seemed to engulf me weren't just enemies, they were echoes of my family, remnants of their despair tightly woven into the fabric of the Winslow legacy. In a horrifying realization, I understood that the darkness was entwined with my own bloodline. As the shadows swirled, I saw my own face twisting among the lost children, a grim reflection of the once innocent spirit, the true guardian of despair, the keeper of their fate. I will not be a part of this, I cried desperately, feeling the weight of generations upon my shoulders. I dove into the heart of the darkness with reckless abandon, a singular purpose coursing through me. I would reclaim the tether of love that had long been severed. The grotesque figure roared in anger, but I felt the echoes of my ancestors behind met-air love intertwined with my own, brilliant and blinding. And as the shadows swirled around, threatening to assuredly pull me back, I shouted, "We are more than the shadows. I vow to lose myself for you." And suddenly, the world erupted into flames of light, a celestial surge bursting with power, shredding the suffocating smog, driving back the unrelenting darkness. I felt the children's fingers entwining with mine. Their laughter rose to a triumphant chorus that shattered the grotesque figure's hold. But then it twisted anew, its last stand echoing through the void. "You will always be one of us, Winslow. This is your fate." It lunged forward, claws outstretched, but I thrust my hand forward, letting out the deep, resonating truth. I choose to love. Time fractured again. The walls of the Winslow legacy crumbled. Screams of terror mixed with cries of joy shrieked into the depths of nothingness. The shadows dispersed, and the darkness began to fade until nothing but echoes remained. Weightless and clear, I floated through the dawning light, still holding fast to the children's Laftera hymn to victory. But as I spun within the brilliance, a shiver surged through me, twisting at my core. The haunting finality of the grotesque entity's voice resonated through the ether, chilling my newly reclaimed heart. You may have escaped, but you can never leave the bloodline. We'll wait for you and we will always be home. In the stillness that followed, the darkness seemed to linger, swirling just beyond the reach of my renewed spirit, a ghastly reminder that while I had fled the torment, the Winslow family's curse would forever be my shadow. And so, I emerged into the world anew, light illuminating my path, but carried within me the treacherous truth. The shadow of the Winslow legacy would lurk in the corners of my existence, fading but never extinguished. As the last whisper faded, that dreadful truth echoed softly in my mind, threading itself among my memories, reminding me of the terrible bond one might never shake. Welcome home.